Former Lagos governorship candidate Funso Doherty has written an open letter to the chairman of the Nigerian Revenue Service, raising serious concerns over the integrity and clarity of Nigeria's newly gazetted tax laws. Doherty says he discovered multiple versions of the same Nigeria Tax Administration Act bearing identical publication details but containing materially different provisions available for download on official government websites. He warned that the situation could fuel public confusion, undermine trust in lawmaking process, and raise questions about which version of the law is actually being implemented. Joining us now to speak on the discrepancies spotted, we have Funso Doherty, former Lagos State governorship candidate. Great to have you in, sir.
It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
So walk us through what specifically you identified on the website and when you checked, because I have tried to go through it myself and find the two download buttons. So walk us through what you observed.
Well, I think I was quite clear in the letter that I wrote on Tuesday, which I think was the 6th, following a conversation or an interview which the chairman of the NRS had given, I think a day or two before, where he essentially asserted that from the perspective of the NRS, there is no controversy, there is no confusion, that they have one gazetted law, which they received from the National Assembly at the end of the lawmaking process, which, I sort of noted that comment. And so it turns out that on Tuesday, from the NRS website, I went to download the act, and I was able actually to download two versions of the act from the NRS website. And there were essentially two different download buttons which returned two different versions of the act. And that's what prompted really my letter to say that, the NRS website should be thought of as a definitive website, right? So if you wanted to know what law to follow, that's a good place to go. And, the idea that one could download two versions of the same act from there, to me was quite concerning. So that prompted that letter. And by the way, I observed that the same thing was the case on the website of the Fiscal Reforms Committee. That is the Presidential Fiscal Reforms Committee. And so obviously you don't want that kind of situation, and I thought they needed to rectify it, particularly in light of all the controversy and narrative out there about potential alterations of the act, which different people have different viewpoints about today. And I am still confused as to how you can have two versions of the same act. And obviously, those two versions had been in the possession of the NRS.
So aside from the previous controversy, right, before the set deadline, before implementation, now on the newly launched NRS website, that controversy is perhaps mirrored on the website as well. In the two copies you downloaded, you cited that there were some differences. Do you mind highlighting those differences for the public?
Well, one that I readily saw was around the question of the reporting requirement. And you know that this was something that had been debated. In other words, what is the threshold for reporting from banks and other institutions? And one version, which had come out earlier, had said, I think 25 million and then 100 million for individuals and corporates respectively on a monthly or quarterly basis. And the other version, which was the National Assembly version that eventually came out, showed that those thresholds were set at, I think, 50 million and 250 million. So these two versions that I referred to as being downloadable from the site on that day, which was Tuesday, reflected these two different, provisions. So that's one example.
All right. I think we're going to get into the implications of that in just a moment, but we do have a breaking story right now. A quick interjection here. The Rivers State House of Assembly have commenced impeachment proceedings against the Rivers State Governor, Siminalayi Fubara. This occurred during plenary today with Honorable Major Jack, the majority leader of the House, brought to the notice of the Speaker a notice of gross misconduct against the governor. Relying on Section 188 of the Constitution, Honorable Major Jack reels out 7 points of gross misconduct against Governor Fubara. Some of the accusations include the demolition of the Assembly complex, extra budgetary spending, withholding funds meant for the Assembly Service Commission, a refusal to obey the Supreme Court on the financial autonomy of the House. After the majority leader lays his notice before the Speaker, the deputy leader, Honorable Linda Stewart, also brings forward a notice of gross misconduct again. The deputy governor, Professor Nam Odu. Some of the gross misconducts are, and I'll just list them briefly: reckless and unconstitutional spending of the public funds, obstructing the House of Assembly from performing her constitutional duties as outlined by the 1999 Constitution, conniving to allow unauthorized persons to occupy offices without proper screening by the legitimate House of Assembly, approaching another group of people for budgetary approval instead of legitimate River State House of Assembly, and seizure of salaries and allowances occurring to the RSHA and Assembly Service Commissions, amongst others. That's happening now in River State. We'll bring you more as the story develops, but you're still watching Business Edge. We do have Funso Doherty with us, breaking down some of the discrepancies he observed with the new tax law, and we'll get into that conversation and the risks involved after this break. All right, evident discrepancies noticed with the tax laws posted on the NRS website and other government website, as cited by Funso Doherty. You've highlighted specifically some of what you have observed, and I think what will be important now is to understand the risk, the implications, how, if this continues and if this is what we go by, how this could play out and affect implementation.
Well, I think the risks are quite obvious, really. If there's a law enforced, particularly something that is material as a tax reform act, then it's important that everybody is clear and on the same page as to which law we are following, right? So we can't have alternative provisions, that differ from one another. And it's important actually for taxpayers to know that they are working with the same law that the tax regulator, which is the Nigerian Revenue Service, is working with, right? Otherwise, how do you ensure that you are compliant, right? So if you take the reporting requirement, which I spoke about in a minute, somebody is supposed to comply with that reporting requirement. So the person who is required to comply with that reporting requirement needs to know that it needs to have the exact thresholds and cannot have two different thresholds, right? And so things also like the powers of the NRS and so on have to be in sync. So I think the risks, are quite obvious and evident, particularly if the information, was obtained via, sort of a government channel, as in this case.
Indeed.
So my message is really, part of my message is really a call to the NRS to sort of address these discrepancies, so to avoid, confusion in the marketplace. It might be an error, I don't know what it is, but whatever it is, they need to fix it.
And just to be clear, you are in support of this, the tax reforms that are ongoing, yes?
Well, so I'm not an expert on tax matters. My position on the whole tax reform is that there is a process that is gone through, right? It's been debated, and we as citizens have representatives in the legislature, right? So it's their job to debate it on our behalf and so on. So at the end of the day, there's a version that's been passed. I think we are beyond the point of the main point now being, whatever is the law that has been passed, there should be one version that reflects exactly what the House passed. Everybody should have that version, and they should just, comply with it. This is not so much about, one specific provision or the other.
Okay, right. So compliance is key, and clarity. How better would you say that this situation could have been handled, and how do you reckon it can be remedied?
Well, I think that, the whole idea that there has to be a much higher degree of transparency around, one, the lawmaking process, right? And, from the get-go, the harmonized version of the bill that was passed by the National Houses of Assembly should be in the public domain. Those should be in the public domain, because if they are, perhaps we will not be in this situation, right? Then, I think also government agencies, government officials need to be forthright, right, in their response when issues like this come up. Because if you're not forthright and upfront, if you don't respond promptly, you give room for these extensive allegations, and you allow people to reach all sorts of conclusions. You can't blame them for reaching those conclusions. So I think that is also important. I suspect that there may be operational safeguards that need to be updated, maybe automation, etc., with respect to the control process associated with legislation and the gazetting process and so on and so forth. So all of those things will need to be looked into. I think fundamentally also, this needs to be fully investigated to actually understand what went wrong. So it's one thing to say that, yes.
Who would conduct that investigation?
Well, various agencies. So first of all, I think the National Assembly, which has already announced an investigation, should conclude its own investigation, right? The relevant arms of the executive, perhaps the Attorney General's office, should also conduct its own internal investigation. If we assume good faith on the part of the NRS, perhaps it also should conduct its own investigation. And, to the extent that there have been allegations of forgery and all of that, then agencies like perhaps the ICPC should also have a role to play in understanding what went wrong. And, was there, intent in any of what we have witnessed, or were they just, errors? So all of these must be done, and we must get to a point where we understood, or where we understand clearly what happened, and put measures in place to ensure that it doesn't happen again.
And hopefully we see just that. It's hard to walk away from the breaking story that we just highlighted happening in Rivers State right now. We know that while you do have that strong financial background, we know that you're also in politics yourself. What are your comments on what's happening there now in Rivers State?
Well, I think the whole Rivers is not my primary domain, but I think Rivers State, what's going on in Rivers State is actually it's actually quite interesting. I mean, obviously, it's all centered around, I think, some key personalities, and we've been following this story for an extended period of time. I think this is just the next phase in, what is an unfolding saga of the face-off between the former governor, who is now the minister of the FCT, and the incumbent governor, and perhaps the dynamics of the various alliances are changing. So, and once that starts to happen, then you start to see things that perhaps you might not have expected before. So, the FCT minister is serving in an APC government, which suggests some form of, alignment with the APC. But more recently, we've seen contentious interactions between, party executives of the APC and the FCT minister, which suggests that, all may not be well there. And then all of a sudden we wake up to this kind of story. So I think, it's really just a wait and see, or sit down look, as we say, and we'll see how it plays out.
All right, so interesting. We will be monitoring that story, of course. And I think as we tie things together, your final thoughts on what's happening with this tax reform implementation. Is just the first month. What do you anticipate? And, we know that it's an issue of trust between the government, the people. What needs to be done to bridge that trust gap? Because there's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of, fear, flurry around it, concern for SMEs, concern for what that even means for consumers. So what would you recommend should be done?
Well, I think that, ongoing engagement must happen. I think that people, this is a financial program. And early on in my career, I worked in an investment bank, an international investment bank. And one of the things that we were told right from our training was that, look, you're going into a career where integrity is critical. You will make mistakes at some point in your career, right? Honest mistakes. But when you make those mistakes, don't compound the mistakes by hiding them and taking additional, just own up and let it go. And I think in this is an important point to make here, that, that transparency, that forthrightness is very important, particularly when something has been contentious, right? So that people then, and because tax is at the heart of the social contract, right? And it's been an issue, to get people to pay their taxes. People don't feel that, government is working for them and so on and so forth. So having a sort of hiccup like this in the course of a long process, and, people like Oyedele have worked very hard trying to, advocate for the reform, and so they've done a great service, right? And we should not let it down by, these sort of final commas in the process. So let's understand what happened. If there are consequences to go around, let them go around. Be open with the Nigerian people so that they will own and get behind the tax laws themselves. And then compliance will follow.
And the others who have been pushing for some sort of suspension. This administration has said that, no, we're going ahead with it. Do you reckon that's the right thing to do amidst the
I had actually written and said that the only way you can, I'm not necessarily pro-suspension or anti-suspension intrinsically, but I think for you to go ahead, you must have a definitive version that aligns with what the House passed, gazetted, clarity, and then you can proceed. But if there's still, this is the version, that's not the version, then you cannot proceed, right? That was my viewpoint. And
still is?
Well, what I want really is for the authorities in question to put out a version, not necessarily the House, because the House has put forward what their own version is, right? So where all agencies must be on the same page with the same one act. If I go to the NRS, it must be the same act. If I go to the tax committee, it's the same. If I go to the government printer, it's the same act, right? And gazetted. If we had gazetted a wrong copy in the past, there must be a process for now regazetting or passing the right administrative processes to say, we had made a mistake in the past. This is now the definitive version, so that everything is on board and there's no question mark, there's no comma. Everybody has the same law, and we'll proceed and run with it.
I mean, I spoke with a lawyer earlier, today about, what he thinks about it. So he doesn't even know what to say because he doesn't know what to read and what is the fact, what to go by as a lawyer.
That's the concern, really.
Yeah. So thank you so much for your observations, first of all, pointing it out, and your perspective on the show today. Funso Doherty, former Lagos State governorship candidate.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.